Hi, my name is Charles Matthews, and today we are looking at answering the question, how to analyze a building's aesthetics.
Hi everyone, it's Charles Matthews here, and today we are looking at how to analyze a building's aesthetics. Now, why would it be important to analyze a building's aesthetics? Well, the main purpose in doing that would be guided by a few key priorities. You want to understand the building's aesthetics so that you may respond to it by way of making something like it or unlike it. And this primarily has to do with the context or the environment that the building is in. I'm not talking about climatic factors as much as other buildings that are around it. Do you want your building to look like everything else, or do you want it to stand out? Or you want it to look kind of like everything else, but also stand out just a little bit? Well, the way you would do that is by analyzing aesthetics. Also look at the purpose of creating interest by way of calling attention to itself. Uh, is there some specific reason why you want to do that, or is it that you want to make sure that your building isn't standing out? You do that by way of using similar proportions, similar materials, for the purpose of suppressing interest by way of making it a background element. So if you can understand the aesthetics, then you can either push the building into the background or bring it forward more based on whatever your goals are. So that's the overall guidelines and purpose. Um, so you understand it by considering, and I would also add documenting the overall impression. Do you want your building to have an impression of being a dynamic building? Meaning, does it look exciting? Does it look interesting? Or static, meaning does it kind of fade into the background? Is it dull? Is it, in some cases, people would say boring. But a building that is static doesn't have to be boring from a viewpoint of interest. It can be interesting, yet uh, reserved, meaning you don't want a mortuary to have the same kind of environment as a theme park. So you have to consider the overall impression of the building. You have to be able to understand or determine the historical style. You do this by way of assessing the building. Does it look like a certain style that you know of? If it doesn't, then maybe you should research types of styles or hire an architect to look at the building and to be able to tell you what style it is in. I'm sure if you go to any architect, they would be able to uh, give you a general ballpark as far as what style a certain building would fall into. Is the style modern or is it traditional? Meaning, uh, does the style of the building have to do more with fitting within a historical context? Does it look like some type of Gothic revival or Renaissance revival or some type of uh, ranch revival, if such a style exists? So, uh, is it more oriented toward traditional styles, or is it modern, meaning trying to avoid a style by way of shapes and forms and curvilinear structures? So determining the historical style is a way of understanding the aesthetics and analyzing and analyzing it. Next, you look at examine the context. What is the geographic surroundings that the building is going into? Uh, do you have rolling hills? Is it a flat plain? Is it a flat plain nestled among mountains? Is it in a valley? All of these ideas come into consideration when you are creating and analyzing a building's aesthetics. What are the surrounding structures? Are you in an area that is highly historically sensitive, such as uh, the areas in the northeastern part of our country where the nation was founded, or in an area that has no real structures to speak of, like a desert, uh, or anything in between. So examining the context of the building is important. Next, you look at seeing what is the balance of the building, the overall balance of the building. What impression is it? And not just impression, but what are the formal design elements? Is it symmetrical? Meaning, does it look more like the front of a person, like where you see a mirror image of what's on the left side of their body on the right side of their body? So does it have symmetry, or is it asymmetrical, meaning there are uh, that I guess would be looking at a person from the side view. Uh, you know, the way that the body is designed from the front looks totally different from the side. And so since that's the case, one is symmetrical, the other is asymmetrical, uh, meaning some things are of larger proportion than others, but the whole thing fits together using balance. Symmetry often has to do with a state of repose or thoughtfulness, thankfulness, consideration, grace, peace, and uh, and symmetry would also have to do with the idea of a mirror image versus something that's asymmetrical, where you have proportions that are larger and others that are smaller, but smaller ideas may be in some ways more dynamic or powerful because of the context that has been set up aesthetically. And looking at the aesthetics of, or how to understand the aesthetics, you consider what are the proportions of the elements that are involved, or you'll have a variety of large and small elements. How are those arranged? Are the windows large? Are they small? Are they large and small in relation to each other and other elements, or are they all one size? And next, how do they fit within the consideration of an average size of people? Now, average sizes being what they are, they don't fit for everyone, but a rule of thumb is that people may be about 6 feet tall. And if that's the case, what are things that would be easily accessible to their reach or them to put their hands on? And do they have textures in those areas, or are the proportions and designs of the various elements like tile, are they fitting? Are they large and massive and taller than people, or are things smaller than people, the size of people, and easily touchable? Those kind of things have a human scale and human proportion. I touched on it just now, and there is a pun intended there. So what are the varieties of textures? Well, textures can be visual, or they can be textures that you can actually feel. And textures that are primarily visual, uh, basically to the person experiencing the building, those would be things that that would remind the person of how something feels, regardless of if they actually can get up there and touch it or not. Maybe materials that are smooth, that are rough, and combinations of types of materials in different proportions, sizes, and colors. Speaking of colors, what are the major color themes? Well, there are two basic type of relationships to consider when you have colors. One type is complementary relationships. That is, if you look at a color wheel, they're the colors that are opposite of each other on the color wheel. An example of that is red and green. Red and green go really well together. At Christmas time, we see that all over the place. At Halloween, you may see more things that are colored purple and orange. You may also see blue and yellow. These are colors that are opposite of each other on the color wheel, and they are thereby called complementary colors. Analogous relationships would be those of colors that are side by side on the color wheel. Like you have your blues next to your greens, next to your purples. Those are all basically within the same side of the color wheel, and so since they're on the same side and they are adjacent to or next to each other, they have what are called analogous relationships. Complementary relationships are more dynamic. Analogous relationships are more static. Analogous relationships are homogeneous. Complementary relationships are diverse. So taking the big picture of all these different types of elements, you then begin to see what is the rhythm of the building. What do you encounter? When do you encounter it? Is it large proportions, small, medium? And so what is that rhythm doing in a person's experience of the space? You can think about it from a musical perspective also. If you're listening to something and something has a steady beat, a song has a steady beat, it's going to create one impression versus a beat that has a lot of different intricate syncopation happening and resolution of various themes. I mean, think of choral music versus jazz as an example. Jazz is impromptu, it is fast at times, it is slow at times. It has major elaborations, it has minor elaborations. Same thing can happen in your design of and experience and analysis of a building's aesthetics. It has to do with the regularity of items that are spaced and the proportion of those items. And finally, there's the aspect of what's called narrative, meaning is there a story to tell that a person could actually read in a book or on a paper? Is there a narrative? Does a building tell a story explicitly? And by explicit, I mean clearly and something that is written out. Meaning, an example that I tend to go toward is theme parks. A theme park would have a building that is really trying to make it very clear to the people who are walking around in the theme park the building's narrative. Okay, what does the building say? Another aspect of the way that this is happening in our society is by way of all the green movement and the sustainability movement. The building should, according to these movements, be a literal instruction device to its inhabitants to teach them how to conserve materials and energy better. So those are explicit ways of a building having a narrative. Implicit ways fall into the category of culture from a viewpoint of how much does something cost, and so if a material is cheap, then it's used in a certain way. The building takes on a certain appearance, and that is driving an implicit narrative about the building, meaning it's not something that is necessarily written down and explained to the people who are occupying the building. So anyhow, that is our look today at how to analyze a building's aesthetics. These are key considerations that a person would need to have when they're analyzing a building's aesthetics.
Hi, this is Charles Matthews. Just wanted to say thanks for watching the video. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to leave those below. And visit our website at grizzlybeararchitecture.com. This video is one in a series of videos that address various issues surrounding architecture and our practice of architecture and grizzly bear architecture. And if you have any thoughts or comments, I'd really appreciate those. Thanks.